Anakin Skywalker stood at the edge of the platform on Mustafar, the molten river reflecting fiercely in his eyes. Steam rose in twisting columns, swirling between the jagged black rocks. He felt as though the heat of the planet matched the fire coursing in his own veins. High above, the sky was tinted crimson, a symbol of the wrath that would inevitably unfurl here. The entire galaxy was at a tipping point, and Anakin, with his abilities, was the lever that would set it all in motion. He had come face to face with Darth Sidious, his master and the puppet master of the grand design that had manipulated the galaxy for years. The cold steel walkway trembled under the weight of colossal machinery. Sparks hissed through the air, accompanied by the churning roar of the lava. Anakin glared at the cloaked figure before him. He had seen the twisted grin behind Sidious's eyes too many times. He remembered the promises of immense power, the twisting of his soul, and the suffocating guilt that followed each dark deed. But here, on the black shores of Mustafar, the final confrontation had arrived. Sidious's voice, raspy with malevolence, slithered across the heated air. "So this is how you repay your master, Lord Vader?" He spat, dripping sarcasm as if the name Vader itself were a taunt. "You attempt to stand against me? You think you understand the dark side, yet you have only scratched its surface." Anakin gripped the hilt of his lightsaber. The bruises on his flesh, the memories carved into his soul, they all seemed to assemble into a single unified purpose: to vanquish the darkness that had enslaved him. His lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, casting a deep blue glow against his face and the swirling ash. "No," Anakin said, his tone weighted with absolute conviction. "I am not Lord Vader. Anakin Skywalker never died. And this ends now." Their blades clashed in a burst of sparks. Sidious's laughter, shrill and maddening, rang across the tumultuous environment. Each strike of the red blade against the blue seemed to tear open the fabric of fate. Anakin's muscles burned with every swing, yet he found in himself a fresh reservoir of strength. This was not fueled merely by fear or anger. It was fueled by love, regret, a sense of justice for all that had been lost. And, above all, it was powered by the knowledge that somewhere Padme was in danger. She had risked everything to come to him here, and he would not let her die because of his failures. The air crackled with force energy, swirling around them in an invisible storm. Sidious's eyes blazed yellow, glowing with triumph whenever Anakin slipped on the walkway or faltered for an instant. But as the duel raged on, Anakin found Sidious's unwavering confidence to be his greatest weakness. He remembered the Jedi teachings that had once been hammered into him. Overconfidence is a weakness. For all his cunning, Sidious had never really heeded that lesson. When Anakin felt his shoulder singed by the brush of Sidious's saber, he seized the moment. The burn made him grit his teeth, but it also sharpened his focus. In a single, fluid motion, he batted away the red blade and thrust his own forward. The azure light of Anakin's saber speared Sidious's chest, and the Dark Lord's final shriek echoed into the steaming skies. The echo reverberated as if the entire force exhaled in relief. Palpatine collapsed onto the platform, his face a twisted mask of betrayal and fury. Silence, punctuated only by the bubbling lava, followed. Anakin deactivated his lightsaber, falling to one knee. The energy he had unleashed left him trembling. He saw it all in that instant. His years as a Jedi, the manipulations that had led him to commit unspeakable acts, the future that now lay in precarious balance. Sidious was gone, truly gone. Anakin had spared the galaxy further torment at the Emperor's hands. And yet, the Empire remained, the war machine still roaring across countless systems. In that moment, a glimmer of possibility danced through his mind. He had killed the puppet master, so who better to realign the galaxy than the one who had broken free? Nearby, Padme's shuttle rested on a small landing pad. Anakin could sense her presence, though he could also feel she was in danger. He remembered how Palpatine's manipulations had sought to strangle her life. But now, with Sidious defeated, perhaps Padme could be saved. Perhaps all that he had dreaded losing could be restored. The lava raged on, but amidst it all, a resolute calm began to blossom in Anakin's spirit. He limped toward the shuttle, coaxing each breath as if it might be his last. When he found Padme, collapsed in the small medical bay within the craft, he knelt at her side. Her face was pale, her eyes closed. For one terrible moment, he thought he was too late. He pressed his hand against her belly, sensing the unborn life still stirring there. His children, Luke and Leia. A tremor in the Force reached him. A hope. He reached out, calling upon the healing energies of the Force. Energies he had rarely utilized, overshadowed as they were by his thirst for power. He had nearly lost that light, but it was still there. Gently, it flowed through him into her, attempting to stabilize her fading body. Time lost all meaning as he concentrated on saving her. He whispered, voice cracking, "Stay with me, Padme. It's over. I've done it. Sidious is dead. I won't lose you. I promise." Slowly, her eyes fluttered open. She struggled for breath, but she reached out to him, trembling fingers pressing lightly against his cheek. "Anakin," she managed. "I felt so cold, so dark. But I can feel the light in you." He touched her hand, tears streaming from his eyes. "It's over. He can't hurt us anymore." Anakin's relief was palpable. The Force was with them, cradling Padme's weakened form in a cocoon of mercy. He gazed down at her, at the children still inside her womb. He promised himself that from this moment on, everything he did would be to protect them, his family, and the galaxy that deserved far better. He was Anakin Skywalker, not Darth Vader, not a pawn of Sidious, and the future was his to shape. In the coming days, the galaxy reeled from a sudden vacuum in leadership. Rumors spread like wildfire. Emperor Palpatine had been killed. The man once known as Darth Vader had removed the last obstacle. Some believed it was a coup orchestrated by the Imperial military. Others claimed it was the Jedi, returning from the shadows to avenge their fallen. The truth was something stranger. Anakin Skywalker had taken the reins of the Empire, yet few outside the highest corridors of power understood exactly how it had happened. In the weeks that followed Mustafar, Anakin traveled with Padme back to Coruscant. The capital gleamed under the perpetual glow of 1,000,000,000 lights, its colossal spires stretching toward the sky in a proud display of the Empire's grandeur. Coruscant carried the scars of the Clone Wars. Entire districts lay in a state of disrepair, while the Senate had been disbanded in all but name. Imperial edicts echoed through the streets, enforced by legions of stormtroopers who marched in polished armor. But there was a hush in the air, a momentary hesitation, as if the planet itself were holding its breath, waiting to discover whether the newly crowned emperor would prove a tyrant or a liberator. Padme received top medical care, courtesy of the Imperial facilities that Anakin now controlled. It was an odd feeling for her, stepping into the heart of the regime she had once fought so vehemently. She had dedicated her life to the Republic, to democracy, to freedom, and now those dreams stood in tatters. She was uncertain if she could ever trust Anakin fully again, but she felt in him a deep remorse and a genuine desire to heal the wounds he had caused. She saw that he had recognized his mistakes and that perhaps the glimmer of hope she had always believed in was not extinguished after all. The day Luke and Leia were born, Coruscant's skies were tinged to gold that even the city's perpetual brightness could not diminish. In a private medical suite with droids and top surgeons attending, Padme brought 2 children into the galaxy. Outside, armored clones stood guard, uncertain if they were witnessing an event of immeasurable importance or simply another day of imperial politics. But within the chamber, the birthing process was sacred, tinted by the Force energy that swirled around the new family. Anakin held Luke first, feeling the tiny heartbeat and that inexplicable bond a father feels upon first meeting his child. Luke's eyes, though barely open, seemed to look up at him with trust. Anakin trembled, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. He passed Luke gently to Padme and then lifted Leia into his arms. She gave a soft cry, no doubt protesting the bright lights. Yet Anakin felt something in her presence, like a gentle but potent wave radiating through the Force. He saw all his fears and regrets overshadowed by awe, humility, and a fierce protective instinct that set his determination ablaze. Padme watched him, her hair clinging to her forehead in sweaty curls. Despite the physical toll, she glowed with an almost ethereal warmth. When the droid medics confirmed her stable condition and retreated to give them space, she glanced at Anakin with an expression torn between joy and uncertainty. "Now that they're here," she whispered, "what future will we offer them?" Anakin gently placed Leia beside her brother in Padme's arms. "A better one," he said quietly. "We can't undo everything that's been done, but we can shape what comes next. I know what the Empire is. I've seen its cruelty. I was part of it. But if it can be turned into something else, if we can restore balance, then maybe their generation won't have to grow up in fear and war." Padme's gaze hardened a little. "Are you saying you'll remain Emperor?" He swallowed, nerves fraying at the simple question. "I killed Sidious, but the structure he created is still here. The galaxy needs stability right now. If I abandon the throne, warlords and power-hungry Moffs will tear the galaxy apart. But if I take control, if I can direct it, transform it, maybe we can dismantle the tyranny from within. It won't be easy. People will see me as Darth Vader, Sidious's enforcer. But I have to try." And so it was that Anakin Skywalker, once the Chosen One, stood upon the Imperial dais in the Great Hall of the Imperial Palace. The lavish carpets and towering pillars paid tribute to the absolute authority the Emperor had once wielded. Armed troopers lined the walkways, and hollow echoes accompanied Anakin's steps. He stood at the podium, flanked by advisors who had no idea whether they should be bowing or preparing to flee. When he spoke, his voice projected across the thousands of listening devices, broadcast throughout the galaxy, though not quite as smoothly as the practiced speeches of Palpatine. "Citizens of the Empire," Anakin began, "our Emperor Palpatine is dead. He died at my hand. I make no secret of that fact. He betrayed the principles of the Republic we once cherished, and he led us into a darkness that has nearly consumed us all. Effective immediately, I declare a new order, one that will preserve the peace we have but also restore freedom where it can thrive. I know what you may think of me. Some of it is justified. But believe me when I say this, we must end the cycle of fear and war. We must work together, or the Empire will crack under its own weight and scatter into chaos." Reactions were mixed. On Coruscant, subdued riots flared in some districts as loyalists to Palpatine decried Anakin's supposed betrayal. Elsewhere, pockets of rebels and former separatists watched with suspicion. Some saw an opportunity. Could this be the moment to overthrow the Empire entirely? Others believed it was a cunning ruse, that the new Emperor would prove as brutal as the old one. They were not entirely wrong to fear that. Anakin himself was uncertain how to lead an entire galaxy. But he knew one thing. Luke and Leia, vulnerable infants, were in this world he now controlled, and he would not let it consume them. He moved his family into the Imperial Palace, a place that once exuded evil. Long corridors lined with silent guards. Secret passages that had concealed the Emperor's darkest intrigues. Anakin ordered many sections sealed, determined that whatever dark ritual Sidious had conducted there would not continue under his watch. Yet to many, the symbolism was clear. The Emperor's seat of power now housed the family of the man who killed him, a man who bore the stigma of being Palpatine's enforcer. Rumors circulated like an unstoppable tide, each one more sensational than the last. Padme adapted to her new role with reluctance. She was no empress, not formally. Her own identity was complicated, as the Senate had effectively been dissolved. But she remained a champion of democracy, quietly counseling Anakin, offering suggestions on how to reopen dialogues with certain star systems, how to minimize aggression, how to transition away from the repressive state that had defined the Empire. The clones and stormtroopers often shot her wary glances, unsure whether to address her with the deference due a monarch or to fear her as an idealistic opponent of the regime. Yet her natural compassion endeared her to many across Coruscant. She visited orphanages damaged by the war, oversaw medical shipments to outer rim planets racked by famine, and tried to repair the battered soul of a galaxy. Meanwhile, Anakin held court in the imposing throne room that once belonged to Palpatine. He discarded some of the more ostentatious trappings but left enough to maintain the aura of imperial authority. People needed to see that the Empire still functioned, that their leader could maintain order, especially in chaotic times. Grand Moffs, regional governors, and military brass traveled to Coruscant to pledge allegiance or to test the new emperor's resolve. He faced them with a composure he did not always feel, but the Force guided him. He sensed who was lying, who was sincere, and when a threat loomed. In private, he contemplated disbanding the Empire altogether, but there was no easy way to do it. Too many systems depended on the existing structure, flawed as it was, for trade and security. In the weeks that turned into months, a shift began to take shape. Decrees that had once encouraged oppression of alien species were revised, though not without pushback from the old guard. Anakin's personal mission to reduce the cruelty inflicted upon the galaxy by the Empire was met by bureaucratic resistance at every turn. He spent endless hours with administrators who quoted imperial law, tried to subvert him with confusion, or used polite flattery to lull him into complacency. He learned that ruling was not just a matter of issuing commands. It was an intricate dance of power, compromise, and vigilance. And always in the background were Luke and Leia. The two children thrived under Padme's care, safe within the palace's fortress-like walls. But Anakin refused to let them be caged in luxury. He often took them, swaddled and wide-eyed, into the gardens nestled high in the palace's upper terraces. There, under simulated sunlight, rare blossoms thrived amid manicured lawns. The city planet stretched beneath them in an ocean of metal and light. He would stand with them in his arms, letting them feel the breeze from the automated environmental controls, pointing out the passing streams of speeder traffic. He knew that one day they might be burdened by the knowledge of who their father was, how he had been both a hero of the Jedi and a dark enforcer of the Empire. He wanted them to see that the galaxy was more than warships and gloom. The Force pulsed through them, the same Force that once guided him on Tatooine as a boy dreaming of the stars. At times, the dark side whispered in the corners of Anakin's mind. The old temptations beckoned him to solve problems through raw might, to eliminate his enemies with the flick of a wrist. But he remembered the lessons of Mustafar. Sidious's fate was a warning. Absolute power corrupts. He vowed not to let the Empire swallow him again. When the Moffs demanded brutal crackdowns on rebellious systems, he resisted. When they insisted that fear was the only way to keep distant sectors in line, he recalled how fear had nearly destroyed him. Instead, he sanctioned negotiations, amnesty for certain rebel cells, and dialogues that had not been possible under Palpatine. Not everyone accepted these overtures, and pockets of insurrection still smoldered across the outer rim. But at least a door had been opened. Padme, meanwhile, sensed the precariousness of their position. She watched from a balcony as stormtroopers marched in formation below. It was an unsettling sight. The crisp lines, the gleaming armor, the mechanical discipline. She remembered the fiasco of the Clone Wars, how the clones had turned on the Jedi at the flip of a switch, how Sidious had orchestrated every detail. Perhaps these legions were loyal to Anakin now, but what if they were loyal to the idea of the Empire more than to any specific emperor? She confided in Anakin that she feared a military coup if he pushed too fast for reforms. He agreed that the threat was real, which was why he had to move strategically. The Force was a guide, but the political realm was a labyrinth. As time progressed, the Jedi became a specter haunting the palace. Once they had been guardians of peace, but now they were nearly extinct. Anakin had been a primary cause of that devastation. He knew no apology could resurrect the Jedi he had slain during the Purge. Still, guilt weighed heavily upon him, and he wondered if rebuilding the Jedi Order was even possible, or if it would be better to let it remain a solemn memory of what had been lost. Yet he could sense Luke and Leia's budding connection to the Force. Eventually, he could not ignore it. They were strong just as he had been. The question was how to guide them. He wrestled with the idea. If he taught them in the ways of the Jedi, would he be condemning them to a life of conflict? Or, if he withheld knowledge, would he be denying them something essential to their identity? One evening, as Coruscant's perpetual glow formed neon outlines across the bedroom windows, he stood over their cribs. The children were only a few months old, but they possessed a calm presence when they slept. Padme was resting in the next room. He whispered softly to them, as if they could understand. Luke, Leia, one day you'll learn about everything I did. All the mistakes, all the horrors. But I promise you this. I will do everything I can to give you the galaxy you deserve. A small cry escaped Luke's lips, and Leia stirred as if in sympathy. Anakin reached out with the Force, gently brushing their minds, soothing them back into slumber. In that tiny moment of contact, he felt the boundless possibility of their future, something raw and beautiful. A tear glistened on his cheek, a mixture of sorrow and hope. Then he quietly exited the room, steeling himself for the day to come.